Today's message is adapted from a sermon by Charlie Roberts. And the text is John chapter 13, verses 1 through 17. I'm going to read that now. It was just before the Passover festival, Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, and the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter and said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." "Then, Lord," Simon Peter replied, "not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." Jesus answered, "Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you." For he knew who was going to betray him, and that is why he said not everyone was clean. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. "Do you understand what I have done for you?" he asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, and nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." In Detroit in the 1930s, 3 young men boarded a bus and attempted to pick a fight with a passenger that was sitting in the back of the bus. They threw one insult after another, but the man did nothing to respond. Eventually, the bus came to a stop, and the man stood up, pulled out a business card, and handed it to one of the men before stepping off the bus and going on his way. It read, "Joe Louis, boxer." The 3 young men had tried to pick a fight with the future heavyweight champion of the world, a title Joe Louis held from 1937 to 1949. Joe could have easily given those boys the fight for their lives, and if he had chosen to, and no one would have blamed him. Proverbs 16, verse 18 and 19 reminds us, "Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Better to be lowly in spirit along with the oppressed than to share plunder with the proud." The Message Bible paraphrases it in this way: "First pride, then the crash. The bigger the ego, the harder the fall." There's nothing wrong with being recognized for accomplishments. In fact, being recognized is kind of nice, but it's when the recognition becomes the motive for our actions, that's when the downfall or downward spiral starts. Focusing on self and pride steals the glory from God, and at the same time, it steals our joy. When praise and attention is required for everything we do, our happiness becomes completely dependent on other people noticing and praising us. And when that doesn't happen, depression, bitterness, and anger can creep in. Maybe you've heard these words before or even thought them before. "I've been working hard at this job for too long and nobody even notices. Maybe I'll just act like so-and-so and do as little as possible until they treat me with some respect." Acting like a slothful person doing the bare minimum is not what we are called to do. We have been called to be salt and light in all circumstances. The opposite of being prideful is humility. The humble person's happiness does not depend on whether others notice their efforts or not. They're secure in who they are. Their happiness does not depend on what other people think. Humility removes the anxiety of the constant need to strive for greater recognition, position, and power. God calls us to shine wherever we are. God calls us to give our best at whatever we do, at the time we do it, the whole time we're doing it. And we do it for Him. When we do what God calls us to do, He receives the glory and praise rather than us. Never think someone is not watching or noticing what you're doing. Someone is always watching. And not only that, more importantly, God is always watching. And God will reward you. And His reward is so much better than the rewards of man. Matthew 15:13-16 reminds us of the importance of how we should live our lives. Take a look at that. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its taste, its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see the good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Ronald Reagan once said, there's nothing you can't accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. And I would go one step further. What can be accomplished is limitless as long as God receives the glory and the credit. There's a story about a turtle that wanted to spend the winter in Florida, but he knew he could never walk that far. And he convinced a couple of two geese to help him, each taking one end of a piece of a rope while he clamped his vice-like jaws in the center of the rope. The flight went fine until someone on the ground looked up and with admiration asked, "Who in the world thought of that?" Unable to resist the chance to take credit, the turtle opened his mouth and shouted, "I did!" Looking for man's recognition rather than God's only leads to disappointment. The greatest gift of humility, the greatest example of humility that we have to go by is the example that Jesus gave us. The first image we have of Jesus is as a tiny baby being born in a stable, surrounded by animals. The image announces his birth in humility, lowliness, and vulnerability. The last image we see of Jesus before his resurrection is a broken body hanging on the cross. Both the beginning and the ending of Jesus' life suggest one of humble service. We see Jesus' humility demonstrated prior to the Last Supper. He challenges his disciples to a life of service. Let's look at the scene once again. Just before the Passover feast, Jesus knew that his time had come to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his dear companions, he continued to love them right to the end. Right to the end. It was supper time. The devil, by now, had Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, firmly in his grip, all set for the betrayal. Jesus knew that the Father had put him in the complete charge of everything, that he came from God and was on his way back to God. So he got up from the supper table, set aside his robe, and put on an apron. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the feet of the disciples, drying them with his apron. When he got to Simon Peter, Peter said, "Master, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You don't understand now what I'm doing, but it'll be clear to you later on." Peter persisted, "You're not going to wash my feet ever." Jesus said, If I don't wash you, you can't be part of what I'm doing. Master, said Peter, not only my feet, then wash my hands and my head also. Jesus said, if you had a bath in the morning, you only need your feet washed now, and you're clean from head to toe. My concern, you understand, is holiness, not hygiene. So now you're clean, but not every one of you. After he finished washing their feet, he took his robe, put it back on, and went back to the place at the table. Then he said, do you understand what I've done to you? You address me as teacher and master, and rightly so. That is what I am. So if I, the master and teacher, washed your feet, you must now wash each other's feet. I've laid down a pattern for you. What I've done, you also must do. I'm only pointing out the obvious. A servant is not ranked above his master. An employee does not give orders to the employee. If you understand what I'm telling you, act like it and have a blessed life. A life of humility is a life willing to serve others. The Bible continually warns against the sin of pride. Romans 12:3 reminds us, for by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each one of you. God gave us all the ability to have faith and to use our faith. And God also has given everyone the ability to serve. Is your faith unwavering? Is your faith built on the rock of Jesus Christ, or is it built on the sand? If your faith is strong, then one of the evidence of that faith is humility and a life of service to others. In God's eyes, if you want to be great, if you want to be rewarded, then you must be a servant. Matthew 23 tells us, the greatest among you will be your servant. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Peggy Noonan, speechwriter for President Ronald Reagan, wrote these words in her book, When Character Was King. A few days after President Reagan had been shot, when he was well enough to get out of bed, he still wasn't feeling well. So he went into the restroom the restroom that connected the room. He slapped some water on his face, and some of the water sloshed out of the sink onto the floor. He got some paper towels and he got down on the floor to clean it up. At that moment, a nurse's aide went to check on him and found the President of the United States on his hands and knees cleaning up the mess that he had made. Mr. President, she said, what are you doing? Let the nurse clean that up. And Reagan responded, oh no, I made the mess. I will clean up the mess. We should never think more highly of ourselves than we ought to. A couple of verses that speak to pride are found in Proverbs 26 and Isaiah 5. In Proverbs it reads, do you see a person wise in their own eyes? There's more hope for a fool than for them. And in Isaiah, woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and clever in their own sight. Society and those in society and politics run into trouble when they think they are superior to others. Their way is the only way, and there's no more room for self-improvement. If there's more humility and more service to others, the world would be a better place. Pablo Casals is considered one of the greatest cellists that ever lived. Pablo played for Queen Victoria when he was 22 years of age, and he played for President Kennedy when he was 86. He was unquestionably the master of this instrument. Yet, at the age of 96, he still practiced at least 3 hours each day. When asked why he still practiced, he said, I think I'm beginning to see improvement. To get better at something, we all need practice. The repetitiveness and the discipline to keep doing it until we get it right. And when we continue to practice, it becomes second nature. It gets easier and easier. That's why the concept of service and being a willing servant is mentioned so many times in the Bible. Because it's something without question we should be doing always, looking for ways that we can better serve others. Our goal should be to be more and more like Jesus and the example that he gave us, an example of service. Galatians 6 verse 10 tells us, therefore, if we have opportunity, let's do good to all people, especially those who belong to the family of believers. Let's not be guilty of neglecting to serve one another in humility and in love. Everything we do as to the Lord with a humble spirit is an act of worship. So every time we serve someone in obedience to God, it is true worship. And for every kind act of worship, service, and humility we show towards others, God takes note of each act as an act of faith. And he's looking for unbelievable and unlimited ways to reward everyone who is willing to serve him. With God's help and the Holy Spirit's guiding and directing us, help us take advantage of all the opportunities God brings our way, and give us the desire to humbly serve in whatever capacity God created for us.